And we're live on YouTube. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, June 22nd. We'll be following along in the agenda issue that was created in the NPM RFCs repo. That item issue was number 603. And for folks that have just joined, feel free to add yourselves to the meeting notes talk if you haven't already. That we copy and paste here in chat. And just quickly, these calls and all meetings and all communications on the RFC's repo are covered under Code of Conduct, which is linked there in the repo. And synopsis is please be kind and thoughtful when others are speaking on these calls, and please raise your hand if someone else is talking, and we'll try to call upon you to speak. Yeah, just try to be kind. And quickly, you want to open the floor for any announcements that folks might have. If there's none, I know a couple weeks back, a few of us were at Austin for OpenJS World. I think there's a number of videos, hopefully recordings from the Collab Summit that happened just after that conference. And I know there's been a number of talks since then about work that's going to happen in the various Node project working groups. But just want to quickly shout that out, that our team was there, and it was a great time. It was great to see a bunch of y'all in person. And yeah, just want to jump right into it. Gar, I think the first item on here is yours. This is PR 91, feature for Git, add support for Commitish.
So yesterday I was writing some documentation around what a package spec is, because it wasn't very consistent across the CLI, and ended up looking in this repo, which parses that argument, and saw this pull request from 2 years ago that solves a big problem that everyone has, and realized it got dropped on the floor. So I spent about an hour implementing the spec in the comments. It was very easy to do. And here it is. I wasn't here then, so I don't know what was discussed. So I added the agenda label in case anyone remembers or has any reason we shouldn't just go ahead and do this.
What's the : sorry, for Commitish? What's that do?
So it allows you to do selectors. So right now, your Commitish can be a hash, or it can be a semver value. This allows you to do : to separate multiples of those. And then it also adds the path as something. It's a path as a new thing, which will add a get subdir attribute to the response, which Koche can then use to say, oh, I need to go into the subdirectory of the get thing I've checked out. So we can now install from a get reference in a subdirectory. So that's what that is.
So I understand that, and sorry, Jordan, if I'm jumping in line there. So the idea would be that you could potentially install a monorepo, like a workspace project, let's say, using the get ref, using this syntax, and not having to have to publish, I guess, the package itself, but you could be using this pathing. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I know it will be helpful for the CLI specifically, because one of the things we want to be able to do is say npm publish npm/CLI hashtag v8.12.3 or whatever. And that will pull that tag from Git and publish what's there, which means that even if the Git reference has moved since then, you're still publishing exactly what's tagged in Git as the thing you're publishing, which is a nice safety thing. We can't do that for our workspaces, though.
So I guess I'm just a little confused. Like, I understand. So when you say Commitish, that doesn't mean just a SHA. That could be a branch, or it could be head, or it could be
any reference.
Something. Right. Okay. So it's a true Commitish. So that's what it already supports. And it makes sense to me to find a way to add a subdir path, because anyone who has any form of monorepo is screwed otherwise. And despite my lack of empathy for monorepos, right, like that's a reasonable thing to expect to be able to do. So it should be doable. But maybe I'm just confused, but your PR seems like it's much more complex and generic than that. Like it's not just tacking a subdirectory path on. And I'm trying to understand how I'm misreading it, or if I am.
Because that metadata has to live somewhere.
Right.
And so because if you go look in 46 of the comments, there's things we know can't exist in the commit-ish that we can the colon can't exist in the commit-ish.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use that to use that. Everything after
it can't exist in a branch name. Okay.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm confused why, like, the example.
We're already using a colon, semver colon.
Yeah,
so this is basically, they had to put that somewhere. And so it goes in everything after the URL would consider the hash. So it's basically, so we're already allowing you to do a semver syntax. You can see in the comment from.
So what's the double colon for? Like
that separates them. So you could do a commit-ish and a path, which you probably will want to do, right?
You
want to go.
And what if you did two paths?
It explodes.
And if you did a semver and a commit-ish, same thing.
It explodes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's in the spec.
Right.
Basically, the big thing is that you can do a commit-ish and a path. That's why the double colon's there.
Right.
It's like kind of being able to deep link into a monorepo.
Yep,
when
this
you install it.
What happens?
This starts to
what
solve
happens
it.
in
Oche,
current versions of NPM?
Look for this new attribute and use it. But this at least makes us able to say that in our NPM package arg.
So what happens to current versions of NPM when they encounter this new format?
I think they probably, if you're saying whether or not we handle it, I don't know how we handle it right now. We probably.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't do the correct thing, obviously, or this feature would need to be added. But like, I guess my hope is that it fails as opposed to doing the wrong thing, and I think that's useful to figure out. And I'm also wondering if this is something that we want to add before we have an easy way to ban git deps from dependency graphs, because this makes sense in your application to use it, but you probably don't want people to be encouraged to publish packages that depend on things in this way.
Well, yeah. So one case I'll make there, like I don't think that we should make that association quite yet, like with banning git deps. This is also still important that we, I think, support this, especially because we'll still install git deps forever, probably, but usually like through opt-in mechanisms, right? Like either through overrides or like in the future, like you explicitly have to say that you're willing to install those types of dependencies. And I don't think we would ever like publicize this too much to be like, okay, like this is a recommended path forward for you, especially because we don't want to promote Git dependencies necessarily. Yeah. But yeah, this does seem like a nice, like very nice feature for folks that are installing and doing development work, right, with monorepos. So yeah. And were you able to figure out what happens today with?
Yeah, as is, it just fails, saying I can't check that reference out.
Okay.
So in order to use it, you need to be on the NPM that has the feature.
So that's actually, it means that we can ship in a mire safely, is probably what Jordan was getting at.
Isn't that what Semver is about, though? Like, this is a new feature, right?
But breaking, like, people rely on things working one way.
Well,
so like, you know what I mean?
Everything's a major in NPM, every feature. Because like this new NPM query command, if I run it in NPM right now, it's going to explode. I can't put it in my stuff,
yeah.
right?
There's a big difference between a feature and something that can get published to the ecosystem and used transitively without the person getting affected knowing about it. And things that can go in the dependency lists are thus very different than things that could go in like scripts or something.
Like a reference to a net new command or a net new flag is a lot different than anything that deals with the package spec, right? So,
okay, we shouldn't be encouraging people to publish this is for installing, not for. It shouldn't. The best practices, this shouldn't be in your dependencies. And maybe we should.
People do this. Well, that's the thing. It's like people
will do it.
Yeah, people do this today. Like there's Git dependencies in the top 10, 100, top 1,000 dependencies right now. So like that's why we're saying eventually we'll stop, like prevent you maybe from publishing net new packages, or we won't install them. Maybe we won't prevent you because that's a policy thing by the registry, but the CLI could prevent installation of Git deps when we see them, warn that they exist or whatever in the future. But I
will add, as the few projects I have that are monorepos, the inability to do this actually protects me from people trying to install pull requests of one of the sub projects before it's ready, and thus unleashing a torrent of bug reports on me that are confusing and hard to debug. So unlocking this ability will actually create some maintainer burden.
Well, I don't know how many people this is, like to generate this commit-ish, like I just don't ever write a doc with this.
Well, right, but I mean like every pull request has a commit on GitHub, a ref generated for it. So you can reference any pull request programmatically, and this
you could have done that before, though. You could have done
correct,
that before.
But on a monorepo, you couldn't include a subdirectory.
Get to the path. Yeah, you're right. You could have.
And so on a small, simple one repo project, you're right. People could always have done this, but no one bothers because those things don't have long-running pull requests with confusing dependency graphs and hard things to debug. But monorepo-based projects usually are that because they're so complex. And so this will create that scenario.
Let's take a step back and not because I know I started the monorepo specific use case. But let's just say you have a nested directory with the package where the package lives, right? And so let's just use that as the path use case, yeah. So no, this has a ton of value. I appreciate, Guy, you picking this up and bringing this back up. So, and I see your hands up. Do you want to also jump in?
Yeah, so just a quick point of clarification, I guess it's for Gar. Just looking at the tests of what would throw. So this would only work on, like, I guess maybe another way to ask this. Can you do this if you are just doing a Semver range? So like O.1.1
that already works.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Oh, because I guess I was thinking that like to thread the needle, if you're like, all right, if you're already using a Git URL, fine, all bets are off. But if it's like an actual Semver range, then maybe that's where you draw the line on a feature.
You can currently already do a Semver range or a commit-ish.
With the, okay.
With just a single colon, I think right now is the way you do, or a hash.
So your commit-ish is to be Semver colon, because colon is not a valid ref in Git.
Okay. So just a like just the Semver range by itself, like you normally have, will work already with something like this.
Yeah, it's already doing that.
Cool, thanks.
The thing it adds is the ability to do the path.
I think this is all part of you having cleaned up the package, or that might have been, I could be speculating here, but cleaning up our docs around the package spec, I think, right, Gar? Like this is potentially falling out of that. So, and to your point, we haven't really popularized or marketed the fact that there's actually a lot of really interesting, unique ways to install like pull requests. You know, you can install a pull request using like just the git ref to the PR through this commit-ish like syntax already. So like there's a lot of interesting use cases that I think exist today that folks don't know about, that you might want to check out, you know, somebody's PR and see the working like package type thing. Go ahead, go.
And we need to stop thinking about just install. This is literally any command where you refer to a package: publish, view, owner, right? This is the concept of how we refer to packages, and all our commands now use this. This started because publish started using it in like 7.0 whatever. And the old behavior where like, if you had a directory that matched the single bare word you put, it would go into that directory and publish what was in there, which was all kinds of inconsistent. It was fixed to parse it like every other command. The person was confused. It's important to remember all our commands now go through this npm package arg, which is kind of this package spec, which I wrote the docs for. So it's not just publish, it's or it's not just
owner
install,
goes
publish.
Through that.
Huh?
Owner lets you target things that aren't on a registry.
Yes, because you're referring to a package and it pulls the name from whatever that is, and then tells the registry.
It fails.
Hey,
probably fails. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
If it's a get ref, it's not gonna it's not gonna
Which
work.
allows you that's how like dot works, right? npm owner dot. Oh, I'll just pull up the package in my current directory. That's the name. I'll tell the registry to be interacting with that package, the name in what's in my current directory, right? You see how that package spec works is kind of a holistic thing. It's not just a package name. It's referring to a package in some way. It could be a tarball, a remote tarball, all these things. If you go look at the pull request, there's a lot of ways to refer to a package.
Any other comments on this? I think it's a great thing to have brought up, Gar. I appreciate that. The work on it too. I think I'm +1. Any other comments or feedback you're hoping to get?
No, just a thumbs up, thumbs down to ship it here.
Yeah, under a new minor, I think I'm a +1 for that. Cool. Is it? This is a separate PR that had tests failing, I guess. That's what they were looking at. Okay, cool. I think moving on then to issue number 519, breaking change engines support for changing engine support for npm v9. Luke, this was your issue. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what we covered last week. There wasn't anything new from then, but if anyone else has other, I haven't followed up on the action items, which were one was to read the package maintenance spec for like package support and to see if there's parts of that we could adhere to. And then the other part was just continuing feedback around this in general. The only large change besides just gathering information about what we want to support is potentially dropping support for odd numbered versions outside of major versions in the npm CLI. And that's mostly because it makes it difficult to do things like greater than or equal to 16 or greater than or equal to 18, and then change that to greater than or equal to 20, which inherently drops support for one odd numbered version. And we don't want to have that be a breaking change while continuing to support, future versions, future major versions without.
So I definitely think you should use the package.js support stuff. And I put the command in the Zoom chat. That's how you can quickly add it to a package. But support is different. Support has no effect on what is a breaking change or not. I see Gar's hand is up. I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up. if you want to say that, you can.
We covered this last week, and I was going to reiterate the fundamental problem here is we are not differentiating between what engines means and what support means. And so when he says support, remember we're talking about what our team will say. Yes, this should work.
Right.
Versus
issues and PRs.
What engine says it's going to run in these node versions.
Right.
And that's to keep it from exploding, not, node 21, yeah, okay, that week they shipped the bug. Sorry about that kind of a thing.
Right.
So that's the fundamental thing that came out of this is we need to differentiate between engines saying what we know it'll run in versus this new idea of what support is that we need to define so that our engines doesn't have to be our support matrix.
I mean, that's sort of, that's what I mean, though, is I don't think that that's actually differentiable and still be complying with Semver. I know that like there's specific maintainers who used to be on your team who like really had wanted after a decade of doing this to be able to drop support for a node version without having it be a breaking change. But that's just in practice not viable. So like, I think it is useful still to have an explicit separate support matrix defined, but support is irrelevant when you're talking about it must still always work on whatever the X.0.0's engines was. It always has to work on those at least until you upgrade, until you bump the X. And there's no way around that short of willfully deciding to violate Semver. You could do that. Packages do that. TypeScript and React have defined for themselves the ways in which they willfully violate Semver, and they consistently stick to that. ESLint does as well, right? The Airbnb JavaScript style guide has to do that also because, otherwise like everything is a breaking change because it causes a lint warning, right? So like it's not out of the question to define your own form of Semver, but like be aware that that's what you're doing, right? There isn't another way to make engine changes non-breaking.
So based on the link that you shared, Jordan, and I know going back 2.5-3 years when the support whole spec kind of came out of the package JSON or the package maintenance working group, that there was definitions for LTS defined for versions like the new sort of spec that you could essentially say apply for. Like if we removed engines entirely, right, and only opted to use essentially the support schema that has been kind of drafted by that working group, like then we kind of alleviate ourselves from that contract, that Semver contract. But I think that like obviously we lose functionality there. This is sort of a heuristic that we've been applying to for the last.
Well, and NPM 7 added the ability to try to install an older version if the engines doesn't match, to try and more smartly pick that. And that functionality would then be useless for NPM itself. Right. Like I think that if that's the direction that you think is worth going, then either. No, I mean, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I'm just saying that there was, in terms of like fleshing out all the options. Yeah, exactly. In terms of fleshing out all the options that we have available to us, and one of those being how do we stay evergreen with the node versions? There was that kind of, option made available based on this problem of the node versions shifting underneath a package that doesn't want to ship a breaking change. I think I'm totally okay with us continuing to ship breaking changes to update our node versions. I'm different than other maintainers. That's my personal opinion. But go ahead, Gary. I see your hands up.
If you look in our npm.js or CLI.js, you'll see that we've got two checks. We've got a hard-coded check for a floor of node that we know we don't work under, but then we also use our engines to talk about what we support. So we're already conflating these things in NPM. And this discussion is an attempt to untangle that and make engines be engines. And then if we have this idea of like, engine says that we're not going to warn in odd numbered nodes because of our engines, but that doesn't mean that we support it long after it's gone unmaintained.
I mean, the problem is that software that worked should work forever if I don't like, and the point of Semver is to say that like time-based decisions or corporate whims of what to support or whatever, like those are not supposed to break software. They may mean that you can't fix a bug that is discovered at the time it's no longer supported, but like it's just those two desires are just incompatible. Like it's just not reasonable to be able to get the benefits of Semver and also have the date on the calendar decide when your software is allowed to break. I mean, I'm not saying that one of them is objectively better than the other. I'm just saying that like the ecosystem we have is the former, and it's just not practical to inject the latter into it, because then you disrupt, then you have an ecosystem that doesn't consistently have the benefits of both or of either one.
Yeah, so I think to try to wrangle both like your understanding here, Garden, and Jordan, what you're saying, like on reference to your support policy, like we are known not to support more than one version, and that is latest. The reason why V6 is still getting some backport security patches is, you know, sort of an out of band situation that we are living with right now, that we hope will never be the case once Node 14 goes end of life. So that is a situation where we consider that to be on life support. Upgrade to V8 as soon as possible, please, if you're listening to this and you're not on this meeting right now. But our support policy is like we only support the latest version of NPM. And so, and by that we mean truly like the latest patched version is the version we are going to support and maintain. And
that's typically the way everyone works, right? Like there's some company, like some of my projects, even I will support every minor line and backport patches back, but like that's only the like most massive, the ones that are the most sensitive. Like almost every project of mine, I'm the same as NPM there, which is that I only support the very latest version, but I will always fix bugs in that. But like, yeah, I mean, the NPM just is an unfortunate situation because it has to, even in the future, it won't necessarily be able to avoid having multiple release lines unless you're just very strategic with your timing for engines and major versions.
Yeah, so we're not going to support V8 when V9 drops. That's what's going to happen. So going through like exactly what Luke has written, like I have to read through the details and the wording exactly how we put it here. But yes, there is definitely, we will not support V8 once V9 drops, as just, they will be backported. We're already having discussions with and going to have discussions with the Node releasers working group about ensuring that we get V9 backported to Node 16.
Which if it gets backported, everything's fine. But if it doesn't, then
that's not on us.
Boat.
Well, that's not on us then. So that at this point, like we are making the decision that it is a security issue for, even at this point, we're getting close to that being a security issue for V6 to still be shipped with Node 14. We're doing our best to help maintain that release line, even though it's not technically really supported. We're doing our best to not disrupt the ecosystem there. But it's up to the Node project to update their dependencies, and it should not necessarily be a breaking change for them to update NPM in older versions of Node. So go ahead, Luke.
Just for clarity, and this is, I think one of the problems is this RFC encompasses a lot of things. So I just wanted to drill down into one thing specifically and the problem statement around it, which is currently we support greater than or equal to Node 16. And during all major versions, we want to, reevaluate our engine support and look at, and I keep using, this is outside the discussion of how we're conflating support and compatibility. So I'm using the wrong terms. But when we switch to greater than or equal to 18, because we want to make sure that's like the widest range possible, and then switch 16 to some specific patch minor version of 16, that is always going to be a breaking change. And so we want to the only thing that I was iterating around like our Semver contract was if we want to have dropping support for odd versions be like, you know, as Jordan said, a special non-Semver thing that we do. And the discussion around that, I feel like is maybe a different RFC or, you know, a more scope discussion just on that. And if we don't want to do that, then how can we increase our engine support without dropping an odd version and having bug reports around that?
The odd version is definitely interesting.
Yeah. So the proposal wrapped up in this whole engine support for what engines should be in NPM 9 is that we do have a special Semver, thing carved out where we say like odd versions, you're basically on your own as far as support, like, or as far as whether you are going to get, you know, engines warnings or stuff like that. And you shouldn't be using odd versions in production. I know that we have, anytime I've dropped support for an odd version in like Semver itself, like there's been reports of someone saying like, I'm getting an engines warning.
It's
now.
Not just production. NPM is almost never used in production. It's primarily used in development and in CI. So like it's the reality is that it's, you know, it's that XKCD spacebar thing. You're going to break a lot of people's workflows when you drop something. And I think it's totally reasonable to do it in a Semver major for end of life nodes and, you know, which includes the odd ones after the next even's released and so on. But like, to me, the difference with support is if you find a bug that only exists in node 17 and it's not like something simple like syntax or something, it's like it's actually node 17 is broken. It is reasonable for NPM not to try to work around that, even if it still supports node 17, like with its engines field. But if like some dependency just added some syntax that just hard breaks in node 17 and that syntax isn't necessary, then like it seems kind of silly to me to say, well, we don't support it when it's such a trivial fix. So like, but that's like a judgment call that can and should be made on case by case basis. But like, I don't know. I think it is just one of the costs of doing business as a maintainer is that you just have to keep supporting what you claimed to support, you know, in the same major line. Like, and as inconvenient and as annoying as it might be, like, I just don't think there's a justifiable way around it.
And so the concern with the support of the odd versions is just that their like NPM might be broken on node 17.
No. The concern is when there's a new node odd, or there's a new node even. In order to add support for that currently, we have to do a breaking change because of the way engines works.
No, that would be a minor. Oh, in the way we're enforcing it?
It's because the other problem we're trying to solve is always keeping our last major version at a greater than or equals to, which solves the problem of we don't have to change our engines like for when new stuff gets dropped, and we can kind of work on our own timeline there, which I think, so that I'm trying to weigh that against dropping support for odd versions. And I feel like keeping that at a greater than or equals to 16 or 18, whatever even version is latest that we support is more important than the odd version support.
So does this get fixed if we're using the caret for the known versions? Like imagine for whatever reason, cross our fingers, like people stop writing software and Node stops being maintained and there isn't a next major version of Node gets released next year, right? So like if we were to just simply be adding to the engines, doing an additive, essentially caret, let's say 20, whatever the next major is, caret 20, once it does land, that is essentially, to me, that's a minor release.
Absolutely.
And we do not need to, the greater than equals is the thing we need to drop doing.
But in practice, I agree that it's more precise to add the caret, and that's a better thing, because then when you add the caret, you're also adding it to your testing matrix, and you know for sure it works from that point forward. But when Node 19 comes out, you're not going to want to skip Node 19 while it's still the latest. So you're going to have a version of NPM that supports Node 19, and that cannot drop 19 without a Semver major. And you have to wait till 20 comes out before 19's dropped anyway.
But I'm saying we just skip odds. We don't define odds in our engines.
Okay, so that's fine. But then what that means is that if you're on an odd node version, you'll get that warning. Everyone will be seeing the warning. And also NPM itself, unless it hard codes around its engine heuristics, when you do npm install g npm, it will probably install, like it will probably look for, actually it might not, because there won't be anything that matches. But yeah, so that would work. It's just, it'll just flood people with warnings whenever they're using an odd version of Node. But yes, you're right that adding it is just is minor. It's totally fine. That's what I usually do. I try not to use greater than equals in any of my projects.
I think there's a way forward with us doing this and without doing the greater than equals, because that seems like that's what's biting us, and that seems like it's also a greedy range that doesn't necessarily. And I see that even in here, like we've said that as much. But go ahead, Luke.
I don't have it in front of me, and we discussed it internally, and it didn't get added to the RFC or to the issue. But Miles, he had some historical context around greater than or equals to being helpful in some cases, and I can find that in our internal thread and either paste that into the issue just as a viewpoint around why that can be harmful in some cases.
Well, we could also just increase our versioning here. Like if we want to maintain our versions, our cadence here, and get closer and closer to the node release cadence, if we want to be more aggressive with version bumps, that's totally fine. Like the thing we all agree with is let's versions are cheap. Like I'm not hesitant to have us have more breaking changes if it's these kinds of changes that are, let's say, minimal, keeping up with like the engine's fields might help us move quickly, especially with experimental versions of Node. Go ahead, Jordan.
So you're correct, versions are cheap, but you know what else is cheap? Maintaining things on old versions. It's actually not hard unless you depend on things that are doing frequent major updates. So if your dependency graph isn't doing that, then it's actually incredibly easy to support old Node versions. I would say I'm the expert on it. And it's not hard. It's just without a build process, there's some syntax you can't use or whatever. And whenever there's some,
you can't use.
Yeah, I get that. And when there is a time when you actually need to use something, when there's a real reason besides it's shiny and I want to use that syntax, do a major version, because versions are also cheap. But like there's this I think FUD-based desire of individuals scattered throughout the ecosystem, a lot of them, who just are like, well, people shouldn't be using old stuff, so I'm doing a good thing by pushing everyone forward. And the ecosystem just isn't pushable. People will upgrade when they're ready, and all that it does to drop support for something is it makes things harder for people, and it maybe makes it a little easier for you. So like, I'm not advocating that NPM change its support strategy here. Like, that's not my call to make. I'm not helping you maintain NPM enough to have a say in that. But like, it's just not as hard as people pretend it is. So like, I think you could also just keep supporting it until it's a pain in the ass, and then you just bump the version.
Yeah, there's a couple things there, but I feel like we're getting into sort of strategy of why we want this in general. And Luke, I see your hand still up. Did you want to comment to that?
Nope, forgot to lower it.
But yeah, it sounds like, do we want to keep this on, or we can just talk about this async? I can remove the agenda label and we can just talk about this async. It seems like we've got enough to probably muddle on this a bit ourselves and then come back with a strategy. Is there any kind of, okay, cool. Let's quickly then move on to the next item that was in here. So this is the PR 5,000. Of course, it's 5,000 somehow. Roy got that PR. For the feature npm query, somehow opened it last week or 2 weeks ago when we were at the conference. I believe, Gar, you had picked up or are going to pick up the work now and continue to clean up this PR and get it ready to ship. I believe, Jordan, you had a couple pieces of feedback. I'm not sure if, Gar, there was anything specific you want to call out here.
No, I'm just fixing bugs and refactoring a little bit of code.
Most of my comments are like stylistic type things that we don't
need
to discuss.
One I got rid of by completely getting rid of that file and inlining it and making it 2 lines.
Cool. So yeah, we'll keep this, I guess, on our radar. But yeah, Gar, I appreciate you picking up the work and helping get this across the finish line here. And we'll hopefully make a bigger announcement about when it does land.
So do you see that Arborist still has an error message about supported class?
Did I unmute it? Okay. I've audited the CLI code and the npm query repo. Didn't find anything worth changing in npm query. Now I'm looking at the actual Arborist code. So that's where I'm at.
Jordan, your question or concern was about whether we're still using the class terminology somewhere.
Yeah, there's an error message that has it on line 426 in the query selector all file in Arborist. I just tacked a comment onto it.
Please change the group. Is that what you would like?
Whatever term you want that doesn't mean group. 70 things already. I'm happy.
I believe it's group. Fine. I believe I changed the docs.
The code also has variables named class, so I got to fix that.
Yeah, that's your problem. And the users aren't going to see that, but I just don't want like error messages and stuff to have that terminology, if possible.
I feel like it's just an eventuality when this gets in the hands of CSS and front-end engineers. They're going to use the terminology like class.
If the ecosystem decides that, then great. The docs should change to reflect what they do. But for now,
we'll try our best.
Our responsibility to prime people, I think.
Okay. Great. Quickly move on then to PR 595, propose the backwards compatible improvements to compression. I believe we talked about this like a month ago. Evan Hand brought this up. I don't think we've done anything here. I'm not sure if this was discussed last week at all. Any updates from folks other than we have to go investigate this?
Yeah, it was discussed last week. Evan said that he would gather some more information and come back.
Oh, Evan was actually able to join?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. I apologize. I have not watched the recording there yet. Last week. Moving on to Owen, your only registered tarballs PR number or RFC number 593. I'm not sure if you have an update from the last time we talked or from last week's meeting.
I do. So thank you for everybody who's contributed feedback so far. So I'll actually paste it in. Got a little summary comment there, which I'll summarize here. But yeah, so I applied some of the feedback from the first round and from our meeting where I was just clarifying some points last week. So I think it's all good. So the main kind of touch points there were moving this to NPM audit instead of install. So it'll just bubble up that way. Set the default flag value or default option set to warn. I took some inspiration from like the npm y style output to kind of give examples of what the output could look like. And I did capture some of those kind of future facing discussions around like ESLint style filters, query kind of stuff. But I put that in the byte shedding section. The only, I guess, this is just personally to me, though I think Wes chimed in as well. Maybe we can chat about that here now is, I know originally it was like only registry tarballs, and then we had the meeting and it's like, well, technically it's, it's not just that, it can also allow other things. So we changed the name to, what I have it set to, only non-remote deps. But the more I still have a little trouble kind of like trying to walk that back because it's like asserting on a negative. And so, I don't know, I just thought that maybe we could take another pass at the name unless anybody strongly objects to another version of the name. I like what Wes came up with because I think, so two things. Yes, technically, so Wes's suggestion, which I like, and I think more or less hits the nail on the head, is only registry deps. And I know that, yes, technically a local dep, like localhost, was one of the exceptions. But I guess I thought that perhaps that swayed the naming to be so abstract that at the risk of like, how do I search for something or how do I think about it or look it up, that maybe, yes, technically 99% of the time we're basically just trying to make sure it comes from the registry and that localhost is an exception, but is it big enough of an exception that it should sway the name, I guess? To not be something as explicit as just registry deps. So anyway, that's the current state.
When we're talking about a local dep, if I do something that's like /etc/something, I can do that, right? Because now it can be an absolute path. Is that cool? Because I would think that I actually only want registry deps or file paths that are inside my project.
Right.
I know we didn't discuss restricting the scope of local paths, but if the reason I'm asking is because if in fact we want things, if the goal is to have things that the lock file can lock, then that only includes portable things, which is registry deps or things within the project. And maybe only portable deps or only lockable deps or something would be an alternative name and also a more useful form of the feature.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, is that how people think of them already? I guess the part of it is how predominant, or I guess what percentage of the registry or local file, like what's the percentage like of allowance, right? Like, do we think that a local file is going to make up 50% of the use case, and thus it makes sense to try and bend the flag to it? Or if like registry deps are like 90%, is it just easier to say only registry deps and in the doc say, but also an exception would be if you use this, so just try to, I guess, thread a needle. It's I'm totally fine with an escape hatch, like, just like Chrome allows you to hit localhost over HTTPS, right? Like it's a little thing like that. If you're a developer, sure. So in that case, but I think just purely from naming, it just only registry dep seems to just hit the nail on the head. And I think it'd be okay to just add an exception add in the docs that there's an exception for this particular type of subject.
So what might help here is this is a set, right? Like the types our set is like a group, another type of grouping, again, as we're trying to lean into in the grouping terminology here. But this is a set that of or type of for different packages. So just like we have with omit and include, potentially it makes the most sense for you to explicitly have a comma separated list of the, or not comma separated list, sorry, multiple essentially includes or onlys for this set. So you can define essentially that you only want registry. And that is like a singular, like the registry is the key or is the value. The key is like whatever we want to call it, like install only or something like that. And that's all this set, you would set whatever you want to allow, like your allow list becomes like each one individually or them all by default, which is what the default is right now. So we support them all. So then that becomes like the allow list. So then you get exactly what Jordan's asking for, which is maybe I want to allow a few of these other types, right? And you can do that. But we don't have to create a flag for each one of those. We create a singular flag that can be defined multiple times with a different, either a different allowed, or we can do it in comma separated list or something. I forget how we handle omit and include for prod and dev and those types of dependencies when we do that. But this is the same type of thing. I feel like this is a similar type of set that we're allowing you to omit or include. And I think we should take the same similar strategy so that you can navigate whatever kind of matrix of support you want. And what we would really push people towards is saying, well, really you should be doing include only like the registry.
The way to push people to that is have it be a simple default and not require them to type out the query. And so even though I completely agree with you that we want something that is configurable in that way.
So that's like the one we make. We can have that.
We still need to answer this.
Sure, we'll have a
question of what the default is called and what it does.
We can have a nice flag that maps back down to that set, right? So that we get best of both worlds. But the only top level flag that we create is the one for omitting like the registry then, so that people don't have to. But I feel like you can get there easily if you, I don't know. I feel like you can navigate this pretty easily in terms of like the design of whatever that flag is.
Because it sounds like being able to flip them on or off is like the ESLint style in a sense where, you can, rule by rule. So I don't know if like that, is that basically like what you could get from query? Because I think we also discussed, and I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, that we do this after query lands. So like, would query give you that like platform so that this can just be amended to just say, dot dash dash whatever. So we just don't have an install pure depth. It's just like, does with query, does it become, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it becomes so much easier, definitely with query, like to just leverage that. Because you can do essentially like I'll actually write it here for you. If we had a flag for query, added that to audit, or what we've also considered is like a standard lib, standard in. So like, what is it? Do something like this, like in query, not type registry, or like the opposite. If we added a flag for query, then it just becomes not type.
So are you saying that there would still be like a, so would you would it only be available through query, or would there still be like a vanity flag that maps down? Like we would support like 3 or 4 like concrete rules that would just be translated, would be down like translated to npm query. But if you want anything more complex, then you have to use npm query directly.
Yeah, because that's kind of like where I think most of our flags are eventually going to map to, is a query, right? Even omit, include, etc. They map exactly to the like selector syntax. Like we don't need to, like going forward, we don't need that. That's why we're kind of like in this transitional period where we're rolling out the first version of the query syntax and the command to actually run and like make the queries happen. But we haven't applied that to any of our like legacy commands, right? So, you know, it feels like we're trying to solve this problem as well, even though like I feel like query is going to help with every single one of these use cases that are coming up, right? And introducing new flags, it's like, should we just hold off? I don't know. Like, how long is it going to take for us to do that, add the new flag versus wait for query to land and then just apply? Really, then the work becomes, hey, Owen, can you go add query support to npm audit? You know, that would be the ask then for us. You know, there's a blueprint for how to like support query and the query syntax inside of the npm query command. Can you go apply that to audit? That would be like the ask maybe then. And that's, I think, a lot more powerful.
Yeah. So that it'd actually be npm query, then an RFC to expose these primitives of like registry versus local versus git or whatever.
They're already exposed, by the way. If you run this query, this actually works right now. This works today. Yeah. So if you actually pull out down Roy's PR and the one that Gar is helping to fix up,
this would be like, wait a minute, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So this actually works right now. Like you can actually get a query. The thing that doesn't work is the audit support, right? Like, but you can query for the type, get like depth type. So I apologize, Gar, you've got your hand up, and then I think we should probably wrap because I know we're getting to you.
I'm glad you said the exact same thing you did, because I'm saying dot should be a dependency type, which you just said depth type. And then the pseudo class selector is just a pseudo selector. So that's how I'm updating the docs. Dot is dependency type selector. And then I'm actually adding that to this markdown file, explain what they are. And then colon is a pseudo selector. We don't need to say it, it's just a pseudo selector. We don't need to say class. And that's how the docs are going to be, and that's how the code's going to be in NPM.
Cool.
Thank you.
So this doesn't really give you a lot of clarity, and I apologize, to move forward with. But maybe what would be interesting is if you can get some time, play with that PR. You can actually check it out if you're using GH. You can just check out the PR locally. You do GH PR checkout, and then the name of the number 5000. If you've got the CLI cloned, the CLI cloned locally. And then you can just link it to npm link, and then you can start playing with that version of npm. Yeah.
I mean, is that, because I see that query is queued up for npm 8, right? Isn't that pretty soon?
That's the hope, is that we're going to ship it either in minor, or we're going to hold off and potentially for v9. It depends on how much work there's left to do it. I think we're in this. We're in a bit of a gray zone here where we're going to start work that will have a bunch of breaking changes for V9. So we might go dark for a little bit in terms of V8.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely play around with it. So yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Apologize, we ran a couple minutes over for folks. But yeah, please keep the conversation going and keep pitching RFCs. We will definitely see you next week, same time, same place. Thanks for hopping on today. Cheers.
Bye.